All right, so this question is asking us to sketch the graph of this ellipse, right? So we got x minus 1 squared divided by 36 plus y plus 3 squared divided by 25 is equal to 1. All right, so there's a couple things we want to do here, right? So I guess in no particular order, but first thing we want to do is let's get the center of this guy, okay? And we know that the center is not at 0, 0 because once we look at the numerator, okay, we see it's not just the x squared, but it's the x minus 1 quantity squared, and similarly with the y. Okay, so essentially this tells us for the x term, how we're going to shift this guy, how many units. In this case, the x minus 1 tells us we're going to shift this 1 unit to the right. And similarly, when we look at the y squared term, right, it says y plus 3 in parentheses, so that tells us that this is going to shift 3 units down. Okay, so if we shift this guy, essentially, right, 1 unit to the right, and 3 units down, right, that means the center is going to be at positive 1 comma negative 3. All right, the second thing we want to do is determine what our a and b values are. Right, so remember that bigger value is always a squared. Okay, so when we look at the denominators here, we see the 36, which is underneath the x term, and the 25, which is underneath the y term, right? So remember, this is the bigger number is always equal to a squared, so that means if a squared is equal to 36, then a is going to equal 6. The smaller number is equal to b squared, so b squared is equal to 25, which means that b is equal to 5. Okay. Now at this point, we have everything we need to sketch the graph, but let's just go ahead and calculate the c value, right? So remember, c represents where the foci will be located. Okay, so c squared is going to equal 36 minus 25, okay, which is 11. Okay, so that tells us then that c is the square root of 11. Okay, and that'll be how many units we move from the center to get to the foci. All right, so now let's go ahead and sketch this guy. Right, so we know that the center is at positive 1 comma negative 3, so that'll be about over here. Right there is our center. And we know that the major axis is horizontal, right? The bigger number is beneath the x term, and in this case a is equal to 6, so that means from the center, right, we want to move 6 units to the right, and also we want to move 6 units to the left. Okay, so you know, the center is at 1 comma negative 3, right? So if we move 6 units to the right, that means the vertices will be here. Okay? And we can certainly get that coordinate, right? It'll be 7 comma negative 3. And similarly, if we move 6 units to the left, we should be about over here. And that'll be negative 5 comma negative 3. Okay? All right, b is equal to 5. Okay, so that means from the center, right, from the center, we are going to move 5 units up, so this coordinate should be 1 comma positive 2, and then we want to move 5 units down, so this is going to be 1 comma negative 8. Right? So it's a little bit longer in the horizontal direction, right? Not by a whole lot, okay, but it is an oval or a football, as I like to say, right? A little bit elongated in the horizontal. Okay? So the last thing we want to do then is plot the foci, right? So remember the horizontal axis, right? That's the major axis right here. Okay, so the foci then is going to be radical 11 units away from the center, right? So that means from this point, right, from 1 comma negative 3, we want to move radical 11 units to the right and radical 11 units to the left. So radical 11 is about a little bit bigger than 3. Okay? So we'll just plot our foci here, and the other one going radical 11 units to the left. Now what are the coordinates of the foci though? Okay? So this is an easy way to write it. Okay? So it's 1 plus or minus radical 11 comma negative 3. Okay? So essentially what that means is from positive 1 here, we go radical 11 units to the right, so 1 plus radical 11. You notice the y value is still negative 3. And similarly, we need to go 1 minus radical 11 units because we're moving to the left, right? So 1 minus radical 11, and the y value here is still equal to negative 3.